I've driven long stretches of road at night more times than I can count, but there's one trip I'll never forget. It was one of those nights when the sky seemed heavier than usual, a thick, starless black that pressed against the windshield and swallowed the headlights as if they were nothing more than flickering candles. The hum of the tires was the only sound that kept me company, that endless rotation of rubber against asphalt echoing like a metronome in the silence. The highway was desolate. No other cars, no signs of life, just a ribbon of cracked pavement stretching forward into emptiness. My headlights cut through the darkness in sharp beams, revealing patches of mist that drifted low across the ground. The mist clung to the edges of the road, curling in shapes that almost looked alive, like pale fingers reaching out, trying to touch the car as it passed. The air inside the vehicle felt different that night, thick and cool, as if someone had left a window open to the chill outside, even though I knew they hadn't. The dashboard clock glowed faintly, its digital numbers blinking in a sickly green, marking the hours that seemed to stretch far longer than they should. Every time I glanced at it, only minutes had passed, though it felt like hours between each check. That's when I saw her. She appeared at the edge of the road, standing still, as though she had been waiting. A woman in white. Her figure emerged from the fog slowly, the way a shape might surface in a half-remembered dream. Her dress, or maybe it was a gown, hung loose, pale against the dark, and the material seemed to ripple faintly though the night was utterly still. Her presence didn't feel sudden, as though she had stepped out from the trees. It felt as though she had always been there, waiting for me, waiting for someone, and I just happened to be the one to come along. The closer I drew, the more wrong everything felt. My stomach knotted as if something deep inside recognized a danger I couldn't fully comprehend. My hands tightened on the wheel, but I didn't slow down. The idea of stopping on that road, in the middle of that silence, made my skin crawl. Her face, or what I could see of it, was pale, nearly luminous in the glow of the headlights. Her hair hung down in uneven strands, damp as though she'd been standing in the mist for hours. I couldn't see her eyes clearly, but I knew they were there, fixed on me, watching, following the car as I approached. The engine roared louder in the stillness, but even that seemed to falter, to dim beneath the weight of her presence. As I passed her, I felt the temperature drop, a sudden wash of cold air that made the windows fog from the inside. My breath came out in visible clouds, though the heater was on. I didn't dare look in the rearview mirror at first. Something told me not to, but the pull was too strong, that terrible need to confirm what my mind screamed was impossible. She was still there, standing exactly where I had first seen her, but somehow closer, as if the mirror didn't reflect distance properly, as if it carried her forward, just a step or two behind me. The headlights of the car stretched long shadows across the road, and hers didn't look right. It wasn't attached properly, its edges jagged, reaching sideways instead of down. I forced my eyes forward again, the wheel slick in my grip from the sweat on my palms. The road ahead stretched on, empty, but I couldn't shake the sensation of being followed. The hum of the tires grew louder, faster, like a drumbeat pushing me onward, telling me to keep moving, keep driving, don't look back. But the feeling didn't fade. If anything, it grew stronger. A prickling heat crawled up the back of my neck, the undeniable pressure of unseen eyes on me. I caught movement in the corner of my vision, white fabric flickering just beyond the glass of the passenger window. I turned my head. Nothing, just the blur of dark trees whipping past. But I could smell something, a faint, damp odor, like earth mixed with mildew, the kind of scent that clings to clothing left too long in the rain. It hung in the air of the car, though no windows were open, threading its way into my lungs until I nearly gagged on it. The dashboard lights flickered, once, twice, then steadied again. I checked the clock, it had frozen. The numbers held, glowing steady and unmoving, as though time itself had been caught in her gaze. The road stretched on, but I could no longer tell if I was making progress. Each curve looked like the last, each stretch of trees identical, a loop of endless black and white. And then, as if the night were repeating itself, she appeared again. This time she wasn't at the side of the road. She stood in the middle of it. The car's headlights washed over her completely, bleaching her form in white glare. Her gown seemed to billow outward though there was no wind, and her head tilted slightly to one side, as though listening to something only she could hear. I gripped the wheel, my heart pounding. My instinct screamed to swerve, but my body locked. The car surged forward, the engine howling, and the instant before I should have struck her, she vanished. Not into the trees, not behind me. Simply gone. The impact never came, but the sound did. A soft tapping, like fingertips brushing across glass. I looked to the passenger side window, and my blood turned to ice. Something pale pressed against the glass from the outside. A hand, thin fingers streaked with moisture, dragging slowly downward, leaving trails in the condensation. I couldn't breathe, couldn't think. My foot slammed down harder on the gas, though the speedometer needle barely climbed. The car felt sluggish, heavy, as though I were dragging something behind me. The smell grew stronger, damp and suffocating, filling every corner of the cabin. I didn't dare look again, didn't dare acknowledge what was there. My eyes fixed on the road until they blurred, and still I felt it, that presence riding alongside me just out of sight, waiting for me to slip, to falter, to glance too long into the dark. The highway stretched on for what felt like forever. And then, just as suddenly as it had begun, the night shifted. The clock on the dashboard flickered back to life. The air warmed, my breath no longer visible. The smell faded, leaving only the faint trace of exhaust and worn upholstery. When I glanced in the rearview mirror, the road behind was empty. But I know what I saw. That woman in white, standing on the side of the highway where no one should have been. That hand pressed against the glass, cold and damp as though it had reached up from the grave. I still drive, though never on that stretch of road again. And even now, years later, sometimes I catch a glimpse in the corner of my eye. White fabric in the dark, keeping pace with me, waiting for me to notice her once more. Because I know she's still out there, and I know she's waiting. I've driven trucks long enough to know the rules of the road that most people don't talk about. The unspoken ones. The ones that no GPS or logbook will ever write down. After years of pushing through empty highways in the dead hours of the night, you start to notice things. Patterns. Places where the darkness feels heavier than anywhere else. Stretches of road that feel like they were built not for us, but for something else. Something that only stirs when the human world has fallen asleep. It was late one night in late autumn, the kind of night where the air is sharp enough to sting the inside of your nose with every breath. My rig hummed beneath me, the vibration running up through the pedals and into the soles of my boots. The road stretched out endlessly, a black ribbon cut through an ocean of dead cornfields. On either side, the husks rustled in the breeze, dry and brittle, the sound almost like whispering. My headlights cut a pale tunnel through the dark, reflecting against the thin fog that clung low to the asphalt. There was no moon that night, just a starless void overhead. The world beyond my headlights didn't feel like countryside anymore. It felt like nothing, a blankness pressing in from all directions. The heater blew stale, recycled air across the cab, and the smell of diesel hung heavy, mixing with the faint musk of old coffee grounds from the thermos rolling around the passenger seat. My eyelids itched with fatigue, but I wasn't quite tired enough to pull over. Driving at night always had a rhythm that kept me going, like the steady heartbeat of the tires hitting the seams in the road. A rhythm broken only when something unexpected found its way into the beam of those headlights. And that's when I saw it. At first, it was nothing more than a shape on the shoulder of the road, standing completely still. I thought it was a person, maybe some unlucky soul who'd broken down and was waiting for help. That wasn't unusual. You see plenty of stranded drivers at night. But as I drew closer, my stomach began to tighten. The figure wasn't near a vehicle. No hazard lights. No smoke. No sign of trouble. Just standing there. Upright. Unmoving. The closer I got, the stranger it became. My headlights spread across it, and instead of illuminating a face, the light seemed to slide off. Like there was no detail there at all. Just a smooth blankness where features should have been. No eyes. No mouth. Nothing. The rest of it was wrong too. It was dressed in something that didn't make sense on a cold autumn night, what looked like thin, pale clothing, hanging loose over limbs that seemed just a little too long. Its arms hung lower than they should have, fingers grazing its sides as though it didn't quite know what to do with them. As the rig roared forward, the figure didn't move, didn't flinch, didn't step back from the rushing weight of 40 tons barreling past it. It simply stood there, head tilted slightly upward, blank surface catching the glow of my lights in the strangest way, like wet porcelain reflecting a candle flame. For a moment, time warped. The rhythm of the tires against the seams vanished. The hum of the engine dulled. Everything slowed as though the world wanted me to see it in perfect detail. I swear, as I passed it, I felt its attention pressing against me, even without eyes. It wasn't just standing there. It was watching. Then the rig surged past, and the figure vanished into the black of my side mirrors. My hands clenched tighter around the wheel. The vibration of the road returned. The heater hissed back into focus, and I realized my chest was tight, like I'd been holding my breath. My heart pounded too hard, blood rushing in my ears. I kept driving, knuckles pale against the wheel, trying to rationalize what I'd just seen. Fatigue. Shadows. Maybe someone in a mask, though no mask could erase a face so completely. I told myself not to look back, but my eyes betrayed me, flicking toward the mirror. At first, it was gone. Nothing but empty road stretching out behind me. And then, just as the fog rolled thicker across the pavement, I thought I saw it again. Farther back, barely more than a pale blur against the dark. Standing in the center of the road this time, I gripped the wheel tighter, fighting the urge to slam the brakes. The image shrank in the mirror until the fog swallowed it whole, but by then, the damage was done. The rhythm was broken. The night no longer felt empty, it felt inhabited. The cab was suffocating. The recycled air smelled wrong, heavy with something sweet and metallic, almost like rust. My skin prickled as though the heater had switched to blowing cold air, though the dial hadn't moved. Every instinct screamed to pull over, but another, deeper instinct told me not to. That stopping would mean letting whatever that thing was catch up. So I kept going, mile after mile. The road blurred together. My headlights carved through fog that seemed to get thicker with every bend. The cornfields gave way to stretches of forest, trees crowding close on either side, their branches clawing at the void above. I started to feel like I wasn't on a familiar highway anymore. The signs had disappeared, the mile markers too. Just endless asphalt, hemmed in by black trees and white mist. I checked the clock on the dash. The numbers flickered faintly, unreadable for a second before returning, but the time didn't make sense. I'd only been driving another half hour at most, but the clock told me hours had passed. And then I saw it again. This time, directly in the headlights. Not on the shoulder. Not behind me. Dead center on the road ahead, as though it had been waiting for me. Its posture was the same, arms hanging too low, head tilted slightly upward, but now I could see its skin. If it was skin, pale, almost translucent, stretched tight over the blank curve where a face should be. The glow of my lights seemed to sink into it instead of reflecting, like the surface was soft, porous. I jerked the wheel, heart hammering, and the rig veered hard to the right. Tires screamed against the asphalt, the trailer rattling violently as it swayed. I barely managed to keep it from tipping. By the time I corrected and looked back up, the figure was gone. But I swear I felt something brush the side of the cab as I passed. A whisper of contact, like fingers dragging against the metal. For the next stretch of road, I didn't breathe right. My chest rose in shallow gasps, lungs unwilling to fill. I rolled down the window just to get fresh air, and the night rushed in, cold, damp, smelling of wet leaves and soil. It grounded me for a moment, enough to realize my knuckles were still locked around the wheel, tendons straining. The fear didn't pass. It never did, even when the fog eventually began to thin, and the trees pulled away to reveal the open stretch of highway again. I couldn't shake the weight of that faceless figure. I knew I'd passed it, left it behind, but it didn't feel gone. It felt like it had followed, like it was still just outside the reach of my headlights, pacing me in the dark. The rest of the night passed in fragments, blurs of road, snatches of thought, sudden moments where I realized I'd been driving without memory of the last mile, but always with the sense of being watched by something without eyes. When dawn finally bled across the horizon, I felt no relief. The pale light only made the landscape look wrong, washed out, like it had been drained. When I finally pulled into a rest stop, my hands shook as I shut off the engine. I sat there in the sudden silence, the ticking of cooling metal filling the cab, and realized I didn't want to open the door. Didn't want to step out into the world where that thing might be waiting. Even now, I can't pass an empty stretch of highway without feeling it. Sometimes, when the fog rolls low across the asphalt and the cornfields whisper in the dark, I swear I catch a glimpse of it again. Always standing still, always waiting, always watching with a face that isn't there. And I know that one day, if I keep driving long enough, I won't be the one passing it. It'll be the one waiting for me to stop. It was supposed to be one of those nights that left no trace. The kind of night where nothing much happens, where you end up driving for the sake of it, letting the road stretch out in front of you like a blank sheet of paper. We were teenagers, restless and unwilling to go home, searching for places that made us feel like we were somewhere else. Anywhere but the small town we thought was swallowing us whole. That's what led us down a narrow road no one really used. A strip of cracked asphalt that ran straight through fields and forests. A place that seemed forgotten even by time. The windows were rolled halfway down, and the summer air pressed against my face, humid and heavy, carrying with it the smell of grass baked all day under the sun. The sound of insects screamed from every direction, a constant chorus broken only by the low hum of the car engine. The headlights cut through the darkness, revealing dust particles floating like ash, suspended in the beams before disappearing back into the black. Beyond that, there was nothing, just miles of open space and the feeling that the world had emptied itself out. The thing about nights like that is how quickly silence becomes a presence. It crawls in, settles on your skin, and makes you feel like something is waiting just beyond the reach of the light. Every shadow feels deliberate. Every stretch of road feels longer than it should. The air grows thick, not just with humidity, but with something else, something you can't name. I didn't say anything, but I felt it. That weight. That sense that the night was watching. It happened so subtly that at first, I thought my eyes were playing tricks on me. Out in the distance, where the road narrowed into the horizon, I saw what looked like a shape. At first, it was just that, a smudge of darker black against the dark. But as we rolled closer, the beams of the headlights caught it, and my stomach dropped with the realization that it was a man. A figure standing in the middle of nowhere, perfectly still, as though rooted into the cracked pavement itself. There was nothing natural about the way he stood there. No car, no bicycle, no flashlight, no sign that he belonged to this place. Just a solitary figure. He wasn't waving, wasn't signaling, wasn't moving at all. His arms hung down at his sides, loose and lifeless. His head tilted slightly, as if caught mid-thought, frozen in a posture that seemed wrong somehow, like a puppet abandoned by its strings. The closer we got, the more the details revealed themselves, and with each second my body grew colder. His clothes weren't right. They didn't belong to this decade. A shirt that might have once been white, but was now the color of old bone, buttoned unevenly. Pants that sagged, stiff at the edges, stained with something I didn't want to think about. His shoes were wrong too, leather cracked, worn thin as if he'd walked 1,000 miles on roads that no longer existed. And then his face, or maybe the absence of it, because what the light revealed didn't make sense. I saw the contours of a skull under skin, the vague impression of eyes, but the rest was blurred, as if melted away or hidden beneath a thin veil. It was like staring at a photograph that had been left too long in the sun. Every detail washed out until only the faintest outlines remained. The road narrowed as we approached, and there was no shoulder to veer onto, no way to avoid passing directly by him. The air inside the car seemed to thicken, heavier than the summer heat outside. My breath caught somewhere in my chest, shallow and uneven. The insects that had screamed so loudly only moments before seemed to fade, the night pressing into silence, the sound of the engine the only thing cutting through. Every foot we gained on him felt like a mistake. My eyes refused to look away, drawn to the unnatural stillness, to the void where a face should have been. The headlights washed over his body, and for the briefest second, I could see the texture of his skin, paper-thin, stretched, discolored in patches like something left too long in the damp. There was no glimmer of life in him, no recognition, no blink. Just a figure planted in the middle of nowhere, waiting. And then we passed him. The air didn't feel like relief. It felt worse, because as soon as we slipped by, as soon as the car angled him out of sight, I felt something pulling at me to look back. My whole body resisted, but my mind screamed for it. Against every instinct, I turned my head. He was gone. The empty road stretched out behind us, cracked and uneven, swallowed by the headlights' trailing glow. No figure, no trace, no explanation. Just the absence, like he had never been there. But the thing that chilled me wasn't his disappearance. It was the feeling that he hadn't stayed behind at all. That somehow, in that split second when I turned, he had followed. Not physically, not in any way the eyes could see. But something of him had moved, latched onto the silence, crawled into the thick air that clung to my skin. The rest of the drive blurred, but I remember the heaviness that lingered, the way the night never seemed to end, the way the trees on either side leaned in as though they knew. Every shadow on the road seemed longer, darker, more deliberate. The sound of the engine wasn't steady anymore. It sputtered, coughed, threatened to die, like even the machine felt the weight of something unnatural pressing against it. When we finally reached the edge of town, the streetlights looked different. Dimmer, as though they weren't chasing away the dark, but barely holding it back. My hands felt damp against the seat, and the smell of the night still clung to me, earthy, sour, like something old and rotting had brushed too close. I don't know what we saw. A man, a figure, an echo of something that should not exist on an empty stretch of forgotten road. But I know this. He wasn't lost, he wasn't stranded, he wasn't human in the way the rest of us are. He was there because we were, standing in the middle of nowhere, waiting for someone to notice. And we did. It happened on one of those nights that should have been nothing more than quiet and uneventful. A stretch of road few people remembered, fewer still used. My partner and I had been driving back from a small gathering in a neighboring town, the kind of late-night return where the hum of the engine and the rhythm of passing trees were the only companions in the darkness. The air outside was thick with summer dampness, but inside the car it was cooler, faint with the scent of the air freshener clipped to the vent. The rural roads we took were shortcuts, narrow veins that cut through farmlands, forests, and open stretches where the only lights were the car's beams carving tunnels through the black. There was something isolating about that road, the kind of silence that pressed down on you, reminding you that miles away, no one would hear if anything happened. No houses, no stores, no signs of life. Just the asphalt, the ditches, and the dark. The headlights spilled forward, catching dust and faint fog that seemed to float at ankle height. The tires hummed steadily, but every so often they thudded against uneven cracks in the pavement, sending faint vibrations up through the wheel. That rhythm kept me oddly awake, even though fatigue sat heavy behind my eyes. The dashboard glow lit the interior in dim shades of green and blue, painting my partner's face in pale tones as they stared quietly out the window. There was nothing remarkable about the ride, until the road curved into a long stretch where trees opened up, leaving us momentarily exposed to the wide emptiness of fields. It was there, at the far edge of the headlights, that I saw it. A figure, not walking, not moving, just waiting. It stood on the side of the road, not too close, not far either. Perfectly still, like it had been planted there. At first, I thought it might be a farmer, maybe someone stranded, or even a deer standing at a strange angle. But the shape was wrong. It was tall, unnaturally so, and so thin that the light seemed to slip around it instead of revealing details. There was no reflective shine, no clothes, no outline of features. Just a vertical smear of black in a place where nothing should have been. The oddest thing was how solid it appeared despite its shadow-like nature. Most shadows bend, soften at the edges, lose their definition when light passes through mist or uneven terrain. This one didn't. Its borders were sharp, defined against the glowing haze of the beams. As we approached, I noticed something worse. It wasn't facing away. It was facing us. The way the body angled, square to the road, shoulders sharp against the air, made it feel undeniable. It had been waiting, and the waiting was for us. The moment we passed it, everything inside the car changed. The hum of the engine grew distant, muffled as though I were hearing it through thick water. The cool air from the vents suddenly felt damp and stale, tinged with the faint smell of wet earth, the kind of scent that usually only came after digging soil. I tightened my grip on the wheel, trying to convince myself it had just been a trick of the light. But in the rearview mirror, I saw it again. The shadow had not remained where we left it. It was in the middle of the road now, centered perfectly, standing taller than it had looked before. Motionless still, but impossibly closer, as if the distance between where it had been and where it now stood had collapsed in an instant. I didn't breathe for what felt like an eternity. My chest tightened as though the very act of inhaling might draw its attention, even though logically it already had all of it. The road behind stretched into nothing but black, yet that figure was the anchor, the one thing that pulled my gaze against my will. The edges of the mirror trembled slightly from the vibrations of the car, making the figure look like it pulsed. But its form didn't break. No blur, no distortion, only that unwavering shape, darker than the road, darker than the trees, darker than any night I had ever known. And then the headlights behind us, the ones that should have revealed nothing but gravel and fading lines, flickered unnaturally. A momentary flash, as though another set of lights had caught the shadow from an angle that didn't exist. For a split second, its body seemed longer, stretched upward, nearly scraping the void above the fields. Then it snapped back, unchanged, standing precisely where it had been. The silence between my partner and me grew unbearable. I could sense their rigid posture, their eyes locked forward, refusing to look back. It was as if some instinct told us both that acknowledging it too directly would give it more power than it already had. The road wound on endlessly, but my mind couldn't shake the image from the mirror. I forced myself to focus on the dashes of paint on the asphalt, the way they rhythmically appeared and vanished beneath the beams. Anything but the thing standing still behind us. But no matter how hard I tried, there was this undeniable sensation, like static pressing against the back of my neck. Not touch, not breath, but presence. An awareness that radiated in waves, heavy and unrelenting. At some point, the air outside shifted. A low mist began to creep across the fields, swallowing the edges of the road. It moved unnaturally fast, tendrils slithering in under the beams until the world around us was reduced to a tunnel of light. The car cut through it like a blade, but it wasn't dispersing, it was following. Each time I blinked, I swore the fog grew denser, pressing in closer, threatening to choke the narrow world we had left. And inside that fog, shapes flickered. At first, they were just tricks of the eye, like branches catching the light in distorted ways. But the more I stared, the more they resembled extensions of that same figure. Thin silhouettes just beyond the range of clarity, always standing, never walking, never shifting. Each time the mist shifted, I wondered if there were dozens of them now, waiting in silence. The road narrowed, the trees closed in again, and the beams reflected off trunks and leaves, breaking the tunnel for brief moments. I thought that would ease the dread. It didn't. The woods only deepened it. The shapes could hide more easily now. The rearview mirror had become unbearable to look at, but I couldn't stop glancing. I don't know if it was instinct or compulsion. Every time, the figure was there. Not always in the same spot, not always the same height. Sometimes nearer, sometimes farther, but always present. The further we drove, the stronger the smell became. That earthy rot, the smell of wet soil, compost, and something sharper, like rust. It crawled through the vents, seeped into the fabric of the seats, clung to the back of my throat until swallowing felt like pulling in dirt. The worst part was the sound. At first, it was nothing, silence, absolute and consuming. Then, faintly beneath the hum of the tires, something new appeared. a subtle scrape, like nails dragged across wood. It was distant, almost imagined, but as the minutes dragged on, it grew louder, closer, until it seemed to scratch directly beneath the car. I wanted to accelerate, but the road was too narrow, too unpredictable. One mistake, and the car would flip into a ditch, swallowed by trees. So I held steady, fighting the urge to push down harder on the pedal. Eventually, the road opened again, leading toward a faint glow on the horizon, civilization. Street lamps, houses, the first signs of life we'd seen in miles. Relief should have come, but it didn't. Because the scratching didn't fade, the smell didn't thin, and in the mirror, that shadow still stood, even though by now we had gone far enough that nothing human could have followed. When we finally reached the outskirts of town, pulling onto streets lined with dim lamps and the faint hum of electricity, I dared to look one last time. The mirror reflected only pavement, glowing amber under the lights. The figure was gone, and yet I couldn't shake the weight in the air, the way my lungs still fought against that soil-heavy scent, or the way the silence had carved itself so deeply into my memory that even the sound of the engine felt like a lie. Because when I closed my eyes that night, I didn't see dreams. I saw a road swallowed in fog, a figure waiting at its edge, still, patient, eternal, and somewhere in the distance, scratching, always scratching. I never thought I'd see anything on that road. It was one of those stretches that feels abandoned by time, where the paint on the asphalt has faded into a dull gray, and the road itself seems to absorb every sound. I had been riding my motorcycle for nearly an hour without passing another car. Just empty darkness. The only company I had was the hum of the engine beneath me and the occasional chorus of cicadas that swelled and then faded as I passed through patches of trees. The air had that midnight chill, not cold enough to bite, but sharp enough that it made every breath feel heavier, like it lingered longer in my chest. My jacket smelled faintly of gasoline and dust, a reminder of the road and everything it carried. My headlight cut a narrow tunnel through the night, swallowing the blackness ahead of me, but never reaching far enough. It always felt like the world beyond my light didn't exist until I moved into it. The road wound through flatlands, patches of thin forest, and the occasional farmhouse long since swallowed by weeds. Every so often, a mailbox leaned at a strange angle, marking where people might still live, but there were no lights in the windows. No movement, just silence pressing down from every side. That silence became something I was deeply aware of. It wasn't peaceful. It was heavy, smothering. The kind of quiet that makes you think about how far you are from anyone who could hear you if something went wrong. I was halfway through a long curve when I noticed it. At first, I thought it was a trick of my eyes. The headlight stretched out across the bend, and for a split second, I thought I saw a shape where there shouldn't have been one. A small, pale outline against the asphalt. I leaned the bike straight, and the beam hit it directly. It wasn't my eyes playing tricks. There was a child standing in the middle of the road. I slowed so hard the tires skidded, the back wheel twitching before catching again. My heart pounded against the inside of my helmet. The headlight bathed the figure in harsh white, and I realized it wasn't moving. Just standing. Small shoulders, thin arms hanging at its sides. The kind of size that made me think of a boy no older than 8 or 9. The strange part was how still it was. Kids don't stand like that. They shift, fidget, look around nervously. But this one, it was as if someone had carved it out of wax and planted it on the pavement. I rolled closer, engine idling low, the headlight fixing on the child's pale face. It looked round, expressionless. The skin had that strange quality where it seemed too smooth, almost like porcelain catching the shine of the lamp. The hair was dark, cut short, and unmoving despite the breeze that tugged at the weeds along the roadside. I couldn't hear anything. No crickets, no wind, no engine once I finally killed it. The world just stopped around that moment. The longer I looked, the more details unraveled. The clothes didn't fit right. A shirt that seemed slightly too big, sleeves hanging loose, pants that looked outdated, faded denim, stiff and pale, the kind I hadn't seen kids wear in decades. bare feet pressed against the cracked asphalt as if it didn't bother him at all. A sick realization crawled through me then. There were no houses nearby, not within miles. I hadn't seen another person since the gas station nearly 40 minutes back. There was no way a child should be here. I didn't get off the bike. My instincts screamed against it. Instead, I let the machine idle again, the vibrations rattling up through my legs, grounding me in something familiar. But that grounding didn't last, because the longer I watched, the more I noticed the way the child's head seemed to tilt, not naturally, but with the slow stiffness of something mechanical. The beam of my headlight caught the face again, and for a moment I thought I saw its lips move. Not a word, not a sound, just the faintest shift, like someone practicing how to smile without ever quite reaching it. The road stretched behind it into nothingness. Beyond my light, it was all shadows, shifting and swallowing themselves. That's when I realized how wrong it felt that the child was standing dead center in the lane, facing me directly, as if it had been waiting. I revved the throttle, the sound tearing through the silence like a blade. For a second, I thought the noise might scare it away, but it didn't even flinch. It just stood there, staring, or at least I assumed it was staring. Its eyes didn't glint the way they should under the headlight. They just looked flat, absorbing the light instead of reflecting it. The longer I sat there, the heavier the air felt. It pressed down on my shoulders, thick, metallic. The smell of the night shifted too. At first, it had been just dirt, grass, a faint trace of oil. Now there was something sour creeping in, like rust or rain-soaked wood left to rot. I thought about turning back. I thought about riding straight past it, but every part of me whispered that moving closer was a mistake. That passing it would mean brushing too close to something I wasn't meant to touch. The child tilted its head again, slowly, almost curiously. Its arms twitched, not swinging but jerking, as if testing whether they could move at all. I couldn't stay. The silence was unbearable. The smell, the weight of it, the endless stare, it was too much. I twisted the throttle hard, swung the bike around, and tore back the way I had come. The engine roared, the tires screeched against the cracked road, and for the first time all night I felt alive, desperate. In the mirrors, the headlights' glow shrank into the distance, pulling away from the small figure. But right before the darkness swallowed it completely, I swear I saw the child's arms lift. Not in a wave, not in a plea, just raising upward, stiff, as if reaching for something in the air. The road back felt endless. Every curve stretched too long. Every patch of trees loomed closer than it should have. I didn't dare look into the fields beside me. I didn't want to know if that figure had followed me somehow, just beyond the reach of the light. When I finally reached the gas station again, its fluorescent lights buzzing weakly against the night, I pulled in and cut the engine. The silence rushed back, but this time it was normal. The hum of bugs, the faint hiss of the lights, the distant thrum of a highway. I sat there for what felt like hours, staring at the road behind me, waiting to see if anything had followed. Nothing did. Not that night. Not physically. But I can't get that image out of my head. The pale, barefoot child standing alone at midnight in the middle of nowhere. Waiting, watching, unmoving. Sometimes, when I ride alone at night, I catch myself glancing too far into the dark, expecting to see that small figure standing there again, waiting for me to slow down. And sometimes, I think it's only a matter of time before I do. I remember the night like a scar carved deep into my mind, the kind that never fades, even when years have stacked themselves over it. It was late, so late that even the desert air had begun to cool, the heat bleeding out of the sand and leaving behind a strange stillness. I had been discharged only a few months before, but I still carried myself like I was on patrol. Every sound made me tense, every shadow made me evaluate for threats. My boots crunched softly on gravel as I made my way down a road that seemed to stretch into nothingness, a forgotten strip of cracked asphalt with weeds sprouting through the broken lines. The moon was pale and heavy, barely enough to illuminate the road, but enough for me to see how deserted it was. On either side stretched empty fields, shrubs scattered like bones across dry soil. No houses, no barns, no fences. Just wide, endless land that breathed silence. The air smelled faintly metallic, like rusted iron, mingled with dust kicked up by the wind. I had been walking for hours, the hum of my own blood in my ears the only companion. Sometimes I thought I could hear footsteps behind me, but every time I turned, there was nothing, just the road disappearing into the dark. I told myself it was just echoes of my boots on the broken asphalt, bouncing back at me. Still, I couldn't shake the sensation of being followed, watched, tracked. It was the same weight I'd felt overseas when I knew eyes were on me, but couldn't find the source. The wind picked up, scraping sand across the road. It made a low hiss, like a whisper too faint to catch. That's when I saw it. Far ahead, in the middle of the road, something stood. A shape. Human-like. Unmoving. At first, I thought it might be another traveler, maybe someone whose car had broken down. But as I drew closer, I noticed how unnatural it looked. It wasn't slouched or shifting weight like people normally do when standing. It was perfectly still, like a statue, its outline sharp against the dull backdrop of the night. I slowed my pace, but my boots still crunched against the ground, each sound slicing through the silence. The closer I came, the more wrong it felt. The figure had no features I could make out. No face reflecting the moonlight. Just a silhouette, black, solid, absorbing light instead of reflecting it. The desert was quiet. Too quiet. Even the insects had gone silent, no chirping, no rustling. Only the faint whistle of the wind around my ears. My throat felt dry, not from thirst, but from the heaviness pressing in on me. My training told me to keep distance, to analyze before approaching. But some other part of me, the part that had carried me through firefights and long nights on watch, told me I needed to confront it. I stopped about 20 feet away. The figure didn't move. Not a twitch. Not even the rise and fall of breath. Its head, or what I assumed was its head, was angled slightly downward, as if it were staring at the cracked road beneath its feet. The air grew colder. I could feel it on my skin, a chill that had no business being there in the desert night. My breath came out in faint puffs of vapor, barely visible in the moonlight. The air smelled different now. No longer metallic and dusty. It had a sour, damp odor, like wet soil mixed with rot. I tried to ground myself by noticing details. The way the wind tugged at my jacket, the way the gravel pressed under my boots, the distant outline of hills barely visible. Anything to remind myself this was real, that I hadn't drifted back into one of those nightmare patrols my mind liked to replay. Then, the figure lifted its head, slowly, like a hinge creaking open. The movement was too precise, too deliberate, and when its face, or rather the absence of one, turned toward me, the world seemed to fold in on itself. There was nothing there. No eyes, no mouth, no nose. Just smooth darkness, featureless and endless, as if it wasn't a face at all, but a void staring back. My stomach knotted, and I felt my knees want to buckle. I'd seen men die. I'd seen horror carved into reality by human hands, but this was different. This was something outside of what was supposed to exist. The silence deepened. My ears rang faintly, like the aftermath of an explosion, except there had been no sound. Just absence. It stood there, watching without eyes, and I stood frozen, caught in the weight of its presence. I don't know how long I stood there. It could have been seconds or hours. My body felt disconnected, like my nerves had been cut. I tried to move, to step back, but my legs didn't obey. My heartbeat pounded so hard I could feel it in my fingertips, and yet my body wouldn't respond. The figure raised one arm. The movement was slow, almost ritualistic. The hand, or what resembled a hand, pointed down the road, further into the emptiness. The gesture was simple, but it carried a weight that sank into my bones. It wasn't a suggestion. It wasn't guidance. It was command. And just like that, my legs obeyed. Not me, not my mind, but something deeper. My boots carried me past it, step after step, as though I'd been programmed. I could feel it watching, the void face fixed on me as I moved. I didn't dare look at it again. The road stretched ahead, darker than before, the moonlight seeming to fade the further I went. My throat tightened with each breath. and my stomach churned with dread. I don't remember how far I walked, but eventually, I risked turning back. The figure was gone, but the road behind me didn't look the same anymore. The cracks were deeper, jagged like wounds. The weeds that had sprouted earlier were gone, replaced by blackened soil. And far in the distance, I thought I saw movement, shadows shifting, too many to count. I didn't wait. I kept walking, my boots striking the road, my breath loud in the silence. The smell of rot clung to me, filling my lungs no matter how shallow I breathed. Every step felt heavier, like the road itself was trying to pull me under. Eventually I saw lights. Faint, distant, the glow of civilization. I don't remember how I made it there, or how much time had passed. All I know is that when I stumbled back into the edges of town, the sky was beginning to pale with dawn. No one believed me when I tried to explain, and after a while I stopped trying. But I can't forget. I still feel it. At night, when the world is quiet, I catch glimpses of that figure standing at the end of my street, watching. It never moves closer. It never speaks. It just waits. And I know deep down it will never stop waiting. I've never been the kind of person who clings to ghost stories. I've always thought of myself as logical, grounded, the type who looks for explanations in shadows before assuming anything supernatural. But there's something about certain experiences that leaves you without answers. Something that grips your mind long after the night ends. And no matter how many times you replay the details, you never find comfort in them. This happened years ago, during a trip with my family. I can still recall every detail of that night, not because I want to, but because it's been etched into me like scars you can't see, but can always feel. We were staying in a small rental cabin not far from a stretch of woods in the countryside. The place was old but clean, with wooden floors that creaked no matter how light your steps were. The air smelled faintly of damp wood, and whenever the breeze shifted, you could catch the earthy scent of pine and soil drifting through the windows. It was the kind of quiet place people went to when they wanted to escape noise, but to me, the silence was too heavy. It pressed on your ears, made the stillness of the night almost suffocating. The cabin sat close to a narrow road, and just beyond that road was a thick wall of trees. They stood tall and silent, like black figures watching from a distance, the kind of woods that swallowed light and gave nothing back. Even in the day, it looked dense, like stepping in would mean losing yourself instantly. At night, it was just a mass of endless black, stretching into nowhere. That evening, the air was cool but not cold. There was no wind. The sky had a strange pale tint to it, the kind that hinted at fog forming later. I remember stepping outside after dinner, the wood of the porch cool beneath my bare feet, and hearing only the sound of crickets hidden somewhere in the brush. The night smelled like wet soil, like the air right after a rainstorm, but it hadn't rained at all. My family was inside, probably already winding down for the night. I should have gone back in. Instead, I leaned against the wooden railing and stared at the woods across the road. Something about them unsettled me, but I couldn't look away. The trees swayed slightly, though the air was perfectly still. My skin prickled, and a heaviness settled in my chest. That's when I saw her. At first, it was just a glow, a faint orange flicker at the edge of the tree line, like firelight. My heart skipped because fire in woods like that meant danger. But it wasn't a fire spreading, it was too controlled. The glow was moving, slow and steady, weaving through the trees as though someone was carrying it. Then she stepped out. The figure of a woman emerged from the woods, holding a lantern in her hand. The light swayed with her movements, throwing long shadows that twisted against the tree trunks. She was dressed in something pale, though not bright white, more like the color of worn linen, dulled with time. Her hair looked dark and heavy, hanging around her face and shoulders. I couldn't make out her features. Even with the lantern, her face seemed blurred, lost in shadow. But I felt her eyes. I can't explain it properly, but I knew she was looking across the road. Not at the cabin, not at the night sky, directly at me. I froze. My breath slowed, shallow and sharp. The air seemed to thicken, carrying a smell I hadn't noticed before. It was faint at first, but unmistakable, smoke mixed with something bitter, almost metallic. My throat tightened as if the smell itself was trying to climb into me. The woman didn't move quickly. She simply stood there at the edge of the woods, the lantern casting light on the dirt at her feet, and swayed slightly as if her body wasn't fully steady. The flame inside the lantern barely flickered, even though there was no glass around it that I could see. It burned steady, strong, as though it wasn't bound by wind or oxygen. Something in my head screamed at me to call my family, to go back inside. But my legs wouldn't respond. I gripped the railing of the porch until my fingers hurt, with splinters pressing into my skin. The stillness of her presence was worse than if she had rushed toward me. It felt like waiting for a storm to strike, the silence before something violent. I blinked just once, and when I opened my eyes, she was closer. Not by walking. I never saw her move. One moment she was at the tree line, the next she was standing at the edge of the road. The lantern swung gently, the light falling across the cracked pavement. My stomach dropped. The space between us had vanished, and yet I hadn't seen her take a single step. The road was only a few feet wide. Just that thin strip of asphalt separated her from the yard of the cabin. And in that moment, I was certain, if she crossed it, if she lifted that lantern toward me, I would never come back from it. I don't remember making the decision to move, but my body finally broke free. I stumbled back into the cabin, my bare feet slapping against the wooden floor. The door felt too thin, too fragile, as I pulled it shut. My chest was tight, my lungs burning from breaths I didn't realize I was holding. Inside, everything looked the same. My family was lounging on the old couch, flipping through channels on the TV, oblivious. The glow of the lantern still bled faintly through the curtains, seeping into the room as if the fabric couldn't block it. My hands shook, and I tried to steady myself, but I couldn't drown out the faint smell that clung to the air. Smoke and something bitter, lingering long after I closed the door. I barely slept that night. Every sound made me flinch, the groan of the cabin's wooden beams, the distant chirping of insects, the faint brush of tree branches scratching against the roof. I stayed awake, listening, waiting. The lantern light finally faded after what felt like hours, swallowed back into the woods. But the smell never left. It clung to my clothes, my hair, even when we returned home days later. No one else mentioned it. No one else seemed to notice. I never saw her again, but I don't go near woods at night anymore. Not because I'm afraid of what's hiding in them. I'm afraid of what might step out. I had been driving for hours, following a long stretch of road that felt more like a thread pulled endlessly through the dark fabric of nowhere. It was the kind of road that didn't seem to belong to any map, where the mile markers stood crooked, half swallowed by weeds, and the signs creaked as though they had been abandoned years before. I remember the way my headlights carved tunnels out of the blackness, the beams illuminating nothing but the pale gravel shoulders, the wavering tree line, and the empty asphalt ahead. The night smelled of wet earth and cold metal. I could taste the dampness in the air each time I cracked the window, trying to let a little oxygen slip into the cabin of my car. The rain had passed earlier that evening, but the residue of it still lingered, tiny droplets clinging stubbornly to the glass, faint rivulets snaking across the windshield even though the wipers had been silent for miles. The hum of the engine had become hypnotic, and I caught myself pressing harder on the steering wheel, as though clinging to it would keep me awake. The first time I saw him, he was standing at the edge of the road. Not walking, not moving, just there. At first, I thought he was a shadow caught in my peripheral vision, something thrown by the trees, or maybe a crooked post leaning in the wrong direction. But as the headlights swept across him, the shape resolved into something far too precise. A man, tall, thin, with his shoulders hunched slightly, as if he were folding inward to escape the chill. His clothes were dark, indistinct, as though they had been drained of color. And though his head was tilted down, there was no mistaking the pale oval of his face as it turned slightly in the light. I passed him without slowing. My foot pressed harder against the gas, almost instinctively. There was nothing extraordinary in seeing someone at the roadside, I told myself. People walked these roads. Maybe he was headed to a nearby town. Maybe he had been caught in the rain earlier, and he was just waiting for someone willing enough to give him a ride. Still, there was something wrong about how he stood there. No backpack, no jacket, no sign of a destination. Just a still figure, like a scarecrow pulled from a field and left to wait. The road stretched on. My dashboard clock crept past midnight. The monotony swallowed me again. Trees, gravel, asphalt. The faint scent of damp leaves blowing in through the vents. My eyes ached from staring into the darkness, searching for curves in the pavement that barely existed. The silence of it pressed in from all sides, broken only by the rhythm of the tires on uneven tar patches. And then, after what felt like another 20 minutes of nothing, I saw him again. The same figure, the same stance, the same pale turn of his head as the headlights washed over him. I felt my stomach drop as if the road itself had been yanked out from beneath me. I told myself I was mistaken, that I was overtired, that maybe I had imagined the details the first time. But I knew what I had seen. The shape of his posture, the way he stood with his arms slightly stiff, not relaxed, not natural. It wasn't just similar, it was identical. I gripped the wheel tighter. The car trembled slightly under my hands, though I couldn't tell if it was the uneven road or the trembling of my own muscles. He shouldn't have been there. Not again. There were no turns I had passed where he could have cut across. No shortcuts through the endless thickets of trees. Even if he had been walking, running, there was no way he could have gotten that far ahead. The air in the car began to feel heavier. It pressed against my chest like something trying to suffocate me. The faint smell of damp leaves now carried something sharper, metallic, like rust or iron. I rolled the window up completely, sealing myself in, but the scent clung to me anyway, bleeding into the fabric of the seats, seeping into my lungs. I kept driving. I told myself not to look into the rearview mirror, but I did. For a split second, the red glow of my taillights painted the road behind me, and in that glow, I thought I saw movement. Something shifting just at the edge of vision, swallowed by the dark the moment my eyes tried to focus. I snapped my gaze forward again, jaw clenched so tightly I thought my teeth might break. The road gave no answers. It just pulled me deeper into itself, a black ribbon unspooling endlessly into the unknown. My watch ticked forward. An hour, maybe more. I couldn't tell anymore. Time seemed to dissolve in the monotony. Every tree looked like the last. Every mile marker seemed half-rotted, unreadable. Then again, he was there. The same man, the same exact position on the shoulder of the road. As though he hadn't moved an inch since the first time, yet somehow was waiting for me miles ahead. The reflection of his pale skin in the headlights made him seem almost luminous, though no warmth or life came from it. I couldn't breathe. My lungs stuttered in short, shallow pulls as though the air had turned solid. The smell of iron was stronger now, thick and undeniable. It coated the back of my throat, bitter and metallic, and no matter how many times I swallowed, it wouldn't go away. I pressed harder on the accelerator, but the road gave me no comfort. It only seemed to stretch further, as though fleeing with me, keeping me trapped inside its endless loop. My vision blurred at the edges. My thoughts twisted. The hum of the tires became a low growl, as if something massive ran just beneath the car, following me, matching my speed. Every shadow between the trees looked like it might be him. Every flicker of movement beyond the glass made me flinch. I tried not to think about what would happen if I stopped. If I pulled over and killed the engine, what would be waiting just outside? Would he still be standing there, unmoving, patient? Or would he come closer, drawn at last to the silence? But I couldn't stop. Not here. Not with that figure waiting for me again and again, ahead of me, behind me, everywhere the road wanted me to look. The repetition was unbearable. Each time I thought I had left him behind, he returned. Always the same. Never closer, never farther, just there. As though the road itself had only one ghost to show me, replaying him like a broken record. The dashboard clock told me hours had passed. Yet the night never seemed to end. No towns appeared. No gas stations or intersections. Just the road. Just him. And when I passed him the last time, if it was the last time, something was different. His head was no longer tilted downward. It was turned directly toward me. For the briefest moment, I saw the emptiness where his face should have been. Not darkness, not shadow, just a pale, blank surface, smooth and wrong, like clay that had never been given features. I don't remember the next stretch of road. My memory fractures there, as if it was swallowed by the night itself. All I know is that when the morning finally broke and the horizon lit with pale gray, I was still driving. My knuckles were raw from gripping the wheel. My eyes burned as though sand had been poured into them. And though I never saw him again in daylight, I know he's still there, waiting on that road, waiting for someone else to pass twice, waiting for someone who won't be able to leave. I've always hated driving at night, but that evening it wasn't my car, and it wasn't my call. I was just in the back seat, trying to convince myself that the rhythm of the rain tapping against the roof was something comforting. But it wasn't. It never is when the roads are empty, when the headlights stretch across a slick black surface that seems endless, and when every shadow feels heavier than it should. There were 4 of us in the car, friends, though not the kind you'd trust with your deepest secrets. More like the kind you meet through someone else, where the bond isn't built on trust, but convenience. It was late, past midnight, and the rain was relentless. It came down in sheets, slanting sideways against the windows, distorting the glow of the streetlights into watery streaks. The wipers thumped back and forth in an endless battle, but they never cleared the glass entirely. Everything looked blurred, like the night itself didn't want to be seen too clearly. The car smelled faintly of damp clothes and fast food wrappers. That particular mix of salt, grease, and wet fabric that clings to your skin even after you've noticed it. The air inside was heavy, humid, every breath leaving a foggy print on the cold glass. None of us spoke much. There was nothing to say. The road stretched on, dark, slick, and empty, and our eyes stayed locked on the blur of the rain. It wasn't sudden, not exactly. More like a slow recognition, the way your mind catches up with your eyes when it sees something that doesn't belong. At first, I thought it was a tree branch, a trick of the lights, something dark caught in the glow ahead. But as the car drew closer, the outline became clearer. A figure, standing at the roadside, not walking, not waiting to cross, just standing there. The car slowed down slightly, instinctively, though no one said anything. The rain made it hard to see clearly, but the figure was definitely human, or at least shaped like one. Tall, motionless, perfectly still in a way that didn't seem natural. The storm lashed against them, but they didn't move, not even to shield themselves. No umbrella, no jacket pulled tight, no hands raised. Just standing. Their clothes clung to them, dark with water, their head tilted slightly downward, though I couldn't see a face. Not through the blur of water running down the glass, not through the streaked headlights. The closer we passed, the heavier the silence became. It wasn't the kind of silence you fill with words. It was thick, pressing, like the whole car knew something was wrong, but no one dared acknowledge it. The sound of the tires against the wet pavement seemed too loud, the swish of the wipers frantic. I pressed my face slightly to the window, straining to see, but in that instant, I almost wished I hadn't. The figure's head lifted, slow and deliberate, like it was aware of me, like it felt me watching. Even through the distortion of the glass, I swear I saw something pale where a face should have been. Not features, not eyes, just pale. We drove past without stopping, without even slowing further than that instinctive hesitation. The figure slipped out of the beam of the headlights, swallowed by the blackness behind us. But the feeling didn't leave. It pressed against the back of my neck, a weight, as though whatever we'd seen wasn't done with us yet. The car seemed colder, the rain louder. My skin prickled, damp with sweat despite the chill in the air. I tried to look forward, to pretend I hadn't seen what I had, but the reflection of the roadside in the wet glass kept catching my eye. Dark shapes swaying with the trees. Shadows that seemed too sharp. And somewhere in all of it, I swore I still saw that figure. Standing there, perfectly still. Miles passed. The road didn't change. Wet asphalt. Empty fields. The occasional flicker of a lamp post, dying in the storm. My mind replayed the sight over and over, like it needed to carve every detail into memory, though I wished it wouldn't. The soaked clothes, the tilt of the head, the pale blankness where a face should be. The air inside the car grew unbearable. Every breath heavy, every shift in the seat too loud. I could feel my friends tense too, though no one said a word. We all saw it. We all knew it. Pretending otherwise wouldn't make it vanish. Then came the moment that made me realize silence was worse than any scream. The wipers swept across the glass, clearing a thick sheet of water for just a second. And in that brief clearing, illuminated by the beam of the headlights, there it was again. Standing by the roadside. Not behind us. Ahead. Exactly the same as before. Perfectly still. Tilted head. Pale suggestion of a face. The driver didn't react. Not with words. Not with sound. Just the smallest twitch in the grip on the steering wheel. The speed of the car didn't change, but I could feel the dread, the weight of it, crushing down on all of us. The rain seemed louder. The air seemed heavier. We passed it again, just as before. No movement, no acknowledgement. Just standing there, like a photograph burned into reality, waiting to be seen. This time, I didn't look back. I couldn't. The idea that it might still be there, or worse, that it wouldn't, was too much. But it wasn't the last time. Over the next stretch of road, every few miles, through the distorted smear of rain and headlights, we saw it again. Always the same. Always still. Always waiting. And every time, the silence inside the car grew thicker. By the third sighting, I could feel tears pressing at the corners of my eyes, not from sadness, but from the unbearable pressure of knowing we weren't just passing something standing in the rain. It was something standing for us. The storm carried on. The night dragged endlessly. And that figure, whatever it was, never left us. Even now, when I drive in the rain, when the roads are slick and empty and the world feels drowned, I can't shake the memory. I can't look at the roadside without expecting to see it. Still, waiting, watching, because I know what I saw that night. We all did, and none of us spoke about it again. I've always driven late. Commuting home from my job has meant long stretches of dark roads, the kind where the yellow lines blur into a hypnotic rhythm and the sound of your own tires becomes the only companion. Some people hate it, but I've grown almost comfortable with the stillness of the night. The way the headlights carve out their own tunnel through the blackness. The way the world seems emptied, hushed, like it belongs to you alone. That night was like any other, at least at first. The air outside was damp, cool, and heavy with the smell of wet earth. It had rained earlier, not a storm, just a soaking drizzle that had left the pavement slick and the fields on either side of the road glistening under the moonlight. There's a peculiar sound when your tires hum over wet asphalt. It's softer, almost muffled, as if the road swallows the noise before it reaches back to you. I had the window cracked just slightly, letting in a thin draft that carried the lingering scent of rain and the faint musk of farmland. My eyes had settled into the trance of distance driving. Power lines rose and fell along the shoulder. Street signs flashed silver and green in my headlights before being devoured by darkness again. The world beyond the beam of the car didn't feel real. Just shadows stacked upon shadows. Sometimes I'd catch the movement of branches bending under the weight of water, or the flash of an animal's reflective eyes deep in the grass. But for the most part, it was just the steady glide forward, hour after hour. It happened gradually. A shift, at first so small I wasn't sure I had really seen it. Something pale near the edge of the road. Not clothing, not metal, not debris. Just pale. It caught the edge of the light, then slipped away again. I leaned slightly toward the windshield, eyes narrowing, trying to pick up the shape again. And then, as the car rolled forward, the headlights revealed it more clearly. Bare feet, two of them, side by side, standing on the wet asphalt at the very edge of the road. I remember the way my stomach dropped in that instant. It wasn't like seeing an animal. It wasn't like spotting another car. Human feet, planted firmly, toes splayed slightly as if pressing against the cold surface. White against the black. Naked. Exposed. The rest of the figure was swallowed by shadow. My headlights never caught more than the ankles, but those feet were enough. They weren't running. They weren't stepping. They were just there, as if the person had been waiting, standing perfectly still in the dripping darkness. I slowed. Not much, just enough to keep control on the slick road. The air inside the car felt instantly heavier. My ears strained for sound, as though I'd hear something over the engine, but there was nothing. Just the faint whisper of wet tires cutting through the quiet. I passed them, or I thought I did. The car's beam swept forward, and suddenly the pale shapes slipped out of sight. Darkness reclaimed them. For a moment I wondered if I had imagined it, if fatigue had twisted the shadows into something they weren't. But no, I know what I saw. I kept driving, but my grip on the steering wheel had gone stiff. My eyes flicked repeatedly to the rearview mirror, half expecting to see a figure stepping into the road behind me. The glass reflected only the tunnel of light receding into blackness. My heart was beating harder than I liked to admit. I told myself it was just someone walking. Maybe they lived out there, one of those strange, reclusive houses tucked back behind the fields. Maybe they had stepped onto the road for a moment, barefoot after the rain. Odd, but not impossible. Except, who stands barefoot, motionless, in the dark on a rural highway at midnight? The question stuck with me. Miles passed. The wet smell of rain lingered. My headlights picked up nothing but empty road. And just when I had started to unclench my jaw, just when I had begun to convince myself I was overreacting, I saw them again. Bare feet. Same place. Same stance. It was impossible. I had been driving steadily forward for at least 10 minutes. The road had no turns, no loops. There was no way I could circle back to the same spot. And yet, there they were. Toes curled slightly against the road's shoulder, pale skin gleaming faintly in the light. This time, I didn't slow. I pressed my foot harder on the gas, feeling the car strain slightly as it surged forward. My breath had gone shallow, but I didn't dare break my gaze from the strip of asphalt directly ahead. I didn't want to look at the feet, but I couldn't help it. They were there. They were real. And then gone again, swallowed whole by the dark. The minutes that followed were some of the longest of my life. The interior of the car felt claustrophobic, every shadow at the edge of the dash seeming to lean closer. My ears picked up phantom noises, the drip of water, the faint squelch of mud, the imagined slap of bare soles against wet ground. My mind replayed the image over and over, the way those feet had been planted, unflinching, as if rooted to the earth. When I saw them for the third time, I nearly drove off the road. There they were, same pale shapes, catching the light. Only this time, I swear they were closer. Not just at the edge. They were angled slightly more toward the road, as if whoever stood in the dark had shifted, turning to face the path of my car. The skin of my arms prickled so hard it hurt. I could feel sweat building at the base of my neck despite the cool air leaking from the cracked window. My eyes burned from not blinking. And still I drove. I couldn't stop. Stopping meant acknowledging it, meant giving whatever was out there time to step closer. The only thing that kept me moving was the thought that speed could outpace it, that distance could make it vanish. But distance didn't matter. No matter how far I went, no matter how many minutes of empty road stretched between us, those feet always returned. Waiting. Watching. The fourth time, I tried something different. I gripped the wheel tighter, and just before I reached the spot, I forced my gaze straight ahead. I didn't look. I didn't let my eyes drift to the shoulder. I thought if I ignored it, if I denied its existence, it wouldn't appear. But I saw them anyway. Peripheral vision caught them, pale and sharp, just enough to burn into my mind. The road felt endless. I lost track of time. My body ached from tension. The hum of the engine became oppressive, filling my ears like a suffocating drone. Every instinct screamed at me to leave the road, to turn off, to find another way. But this stretch of highway had no exits for miles. It was just me, the dark, and those feet. I don't remember how many times I passed them. 5? 6? More? Each time they were the same, unmoving, waiting. By the time the faint glow of a distant town touched the horizon, I felt half delirious. The sight of streetlights ahead was like a miracle. Civilization. Safety. I didn't let myself look into the shadows again. I pressed forward, gripping the wheel until my knuckles ached. When I finally pulled into a lit gas station, I sat in the car for several minutes, unable to move. The fluorescent lights hummed above me. The wet pavement reflected the glow. People walked in and out of the store, unaware and normal. I should have felt relief, but my chest stayed tight, my throat dry, because when I stepped out, closing the car door behind me, I glanced at the ground. And there, faintly pressed into the thin sheen of rainwater on the asphalt, were two wet, bare footprints, standing perfectly still, waiting. I've always thought there was something unnerving about bus rides late at night. There's a silence to them that isn't present during the day. During daylight hours, a bus is alive with chatter, with coughing, with footsteps climbing up and down, with the shuffling of bags and the clinking of coins. At night, though all that falls away, the sound of the engine becomes the only steady companion, a low growl beneath the floor, vibrating through the thin seat backs and into your bones. Outside the windows, the world is reduced to patches of light, caught for a fleeting moment in the glow of the bus lamps, before slipping back into darkness. That night, the silence on the bus seemed heavier than usual. I had taken my usual seat by the window, near the middle, far enough from the driver to avoid the harsh reflection of his mirrors, but not so far back that I'd be sitting alone in the emptiest part of the bus. There were only a few of us on board. A man with a paper folded tight under his arm, a woman staring at her phone, a teenager curled up across two seats with his hood pulled low over his face. None of us spoke. None of us even acknowledged each other. The bus rolled along the back roads of the town, the areas where streetlights grew sparse and houses became little more than silhouettes. I leaned against the glass, the chill of it seeping into my temple. I watched the asphalt unfold beneath us, the road seeming darker than it should have been, as if the light of the bus headlights was being swallowed rather than stretched. Every few minutes, we would pass a sign or a lone light fixture, skeletal in its isolation. Each time the glow appeared, I felt my eyes drawn to it, searching for movement, for some sign of life out there in the emptiness. But there was nothing. Then the bus slowed. The brakes hissed, the sound tearing through the quiet like a sigh. I blinked awake from my half-doze, focusing on the window as we pulled toward a stop. My heart jolted when I saw it. The stop was one I didn't recognize. It wasn't lit by anything, not even a distant street lamp. Just a small shelter, leaning forward slightly, its roof warped, the plastic siding clouded and cracked. The glass panel had been shattered long ago, leaving jagged edges like blackened teeth. It looked abandoned, forgotten by the city's schedule, left to rot on the side of a road no one used anymore. But someone was standing there. The figure was tall, impossibly still, like a mannequin placed precisely at the center of the stop. The rain, which I hadn't even noticed before, streaked down the bus windows, distorting the view into watery ribbons, but the figure remained rigid, unshaken by the storm. The moment I saw it, my chest tightened. The air in the bus seemed to shift, as though every passenger felt something they couldn't name. The driver didn't open the doors. The bus idled, brakes still sighing. The headlights framed the figure in a halo of pale light, but details refused to come into focus. It wasn't that the rain was blurring it. It was something else, like my eyes wouldn't cooperate, sliding off the figure each time I tried to trace its outline. I could feel the texture of the seat fabric beneath my hands, rough and scratchy, grounding me, but my body felt unmoored. The longer I stared, the more wrong it became. The shoulders were too straight, too squared. The arms hung low, stiff, the tips of the hands almost brushing the knees. And the head, God, the head wasn't quite aligned, tilted slightly to one side, as if curious or broken. No one else on the bus moved. I thought I heard the faint rustle of someone shifting behind me, but I didn't turn. My eyes wouldn't leave the figure. The rain kept falling, streaking across the glass, the sound of it ticking against the bus like 1,000 fingernails. My reflection was faint in the window, a pale overlay against the darkness, but when I leaned forward just slightly, I could swear that in the corner of that reflection, the figure wasn't standing in the stop anymore. It was closer. I blinked hard, pressing my forehead to the glass. The figure hadn't moved. It was still inside the broken shelter. But something in me rebelled against what my eyes told me. My stomach knotted, as though my body knew a truth I couldn't articulate. The bus didn't linger much longer. The driver released the brake, the hiss fading as we rolled forward. Relief should have washed over me, but it didn't. The figure slipped out of view, consumed by the dark, and the absence of it felt worse than its presence. The rest of the ride was suffocatingly quiet. Each passenger stared ahead or down, none of us daring to meet each other's eyes, as though doing so would confirm we had all seen the same thing. I counted the seconds, the rhythm of the engine, trying to convince myself that it had been nothing more than a person waiting in the rain, a traveler at the wrong place, the wrong time. But deep down I knew. That stop wasn't on any route. That shelter hadn't been used in years, maybe decades. And no one should have been standing there, perfectly still, in a storm that bent every tree and rattled every loose signpost. When I finally got off at my stop, the air felt heavier. The rain-slicked pavement glistened beneath the streetlights, but shadows pooled at the edges of every yard, every alley. As I walked home, each footstep echoed unnaturally loud, as if the world around me was holding its breath. And I couldn't shake the feeling that somewhere, out there in the dark, the figure was still waiting. Not for the bus, not for anyone else, waiting for me. I was driving late that night, the kind of night where the sky looked bruised, a heavy navy blue stretching over empty fields with just a sliver of moonlight trying to cut through the haze. The road I was on stretched for miles, cracked asphalt with faded lines, the kind of highway no one really used anymore, unless they wanted to shave time off a longer route. I took it because I thought it would be faster, and maybe because I liked the quiet. The hum of the engine was the only company I had, steady and low, mixing with the faint whistle of wind sneaking through the car's old seals. My headlights cut a pale cone through the darkness, catching the white glint of road signs and the broken reflections of old mile markers. Beyond that glow was nothing, just walls of black, a flatness that seemed endless. No houses, no gas stations, just fields and patches of woods swallowed in shadow. There was no reason to expect anything out there. That's why, when I saw it, my mind stalled for a second. On the shoulder of the road, just past where my headlights first reached, something was standing. At first, I thought it was a tree, maybe a utility pole. But as my car moved closer, I realized it had the wrong shape. Narrower, too symmetrical. Upright, yes, but with edges that were just a little too defined. It wasn't moving, just standing there. It looked like a man, only it didn't. The light from my car should have caught details. A face, clothes, the pale shine of skin. But what I saw wasn't that. It was darker than the night around it, like it absorbed the light instead of reflecting it. A figure cut out of the dark itself, thin but tall, perfectly still. A shadow standing upright where no shadow should have been. I slowed without realizing it. My foot had lifted from the gas as my eyes locked on it. My body tensed in that instinctive way, the way it does when something doesn't make sense. And then I passed it. The figure slipped out of my headlights as my car rolled by, disappearing into the stretch of night in my rearview mirror. My pulse was still thudding in my throat. I told myself it was nothing, just a trick of the light. Maybe my tired eyes making shapes out of shadows. But then, I glanced at the mirror. At first, I didn't see anything, just the faint red glow of my taillights spilling over the cracked road. Then further back, barely visible, I saw it. The same figure. It was in the road now, not on the shoulder anymore, standing in the lane, facing me. I felt my stomach turn cold. I told myself to keep driving, to just ignore it, but my eyes kept flicking back to that mirror. Each second I expected it to fade away, vanish like an afterimage. But it didn't. And worse, after a stretch of seconds, I realized it wasn't standing still anymore. It was moving. Slow, deliberate steps, always in the center of the road, always facing forward, always facing me. That's when the road started to feel smaller, the darkness heavier. My car, once a bubble of safety, suddenly felt too thin, too fragile. I pressed harder on the gas. The engine groaned, the tires hummed louder, the speedometer needle climbed. But when I checked the mirror again, my chest tightened. It was still there, no longer walking, running. Its movement wasn't natural. It didn't bounce the way people do when they run. It glided, but with speed, its arms stiff at its sides, legs pulling forward like a puppet yanked on invisible strings. No detail, no face, just a shadow, sprinting down the lane, chasing my car no matter how fast I went. The thought hit me sharp, colder than anything. It had been standing still when I first saw it, waiting, as if it had been waiting for me. The road stretched on, black and empty, mile after mile. No intersections, no exits, no other headlights breaking the dark. Just me, just that thing. My eyes kept darting between the mirror and the road ahead, sweat starting to bead at my temples despite the chill outside. Each time I looked back, it was still there. Not gaining, not falling behind. Just locked on me, running tireless. I don't know how long it went on like that. Minutes felt like hours. My focus narrowed until all I knew was the blur of asphalt under my headlights and the figure in the mirror. I started to wonder what would happen if I stopped. If I pulled over. If I let it catch up. The thought made my stomach lurch. At some point, I realized my tank was dropping lower than I thought. I hadn't filled up before taking this detour. The needle hovered just above empty. My chest tightened with every mile, with every flick of that gauge. The idea of running out of gas here, on this road, with that thing behind me, it was unbearable. The air inside the car felt different now. Heavy, like something unseen had seeped in. My ears picked up every tiny sound, the click of the cooling vents, the hiss of the tires over rough patches, even the faint ticking of the dashboard clock. Each noise felt louder than it should have, like the silence outside was pressing against the glass, amplifying the smallest cracks in my bubble of safety. Then, for the first time, I made the mistake of looking not at the mirror, but at the side window. In the blur of dark fields rushing past, I thought I saw movement. Shapes keeping pace with my car. Too dark to make out, but shifting, keeping parallel. I gripped the wheel tighter. My skin prickled, as if unseen eyes were on me from both sides of the road. But I didn't dare slow down. The needle on the gas gauge dropped further. My chest tightened with every glance. I whispered to myself without even realizing it, small fragments of thought, anything to drown out the image of what might happen when the car gave out. And then, after what felt like an eternity, I saw it, a glow in the distance. Faint at first, then growing brighter. Gas station lights, faded neon buzzing in the night. A building, civilization, safety. I pressed the gas harder, heart pounding. The car shuddered, engine straining as if it too was on its last breath. My eyes flicked to the mirror one last time. The figure wasn't there. For a second, relief washed over me, weak and shaky. My chest loosened, just enough for me to breathe. But the relief didn't last, because as I pulled into the station, slowing to a stop under the buzzing lights, I realized how silent it was. No cars, no people, just empty pumps and a darkened building. The air smelled of old oil and dust. The neon sign flickered overhead, buzzing loud in the quiet. And as I stepped out of the car, boots hitting the cracked pavement, I felt it. That same weight, that same pressure, like something had followed me here, like something was still waiting. Somewhere, in the places just beyond the light, where the shadows were deepest. And when the neon buzzed and flickered again, I thought I saw it, just for a fraction of a second. A darker patch among the dark, upright, still, waiting again.